Greetings historians, welcome to Lore of the Dragon. So, today was going to be a different video along the same subject as what I'm going to be talking about today. However, there's something that came up that, well, I wanted to focus on primarily before I made this other video. Also, along with that, there was also time, and I didn't want this to become something that was released 4 weeks after my last video. Because quite honestly, the quality of that video was not up to par with what I want on Lore of the Dragon. However, that video, which will be about the power-ups within Spyro in the original timeline, will still be coming out, but at a later date. Now, part of that video was going to be focusing on, of course, Bubble, something that's only in Enter the Dragonfly, at least from what we've seen, or at least have been told. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about something that's within the Reignited art book. And while it's been a while since that has been released, and I imagine it's about time that I get to start talking about it, because there are a good couple things I do want to talk about, and this is one of them. In fact, this is one of the things in the book that isn't even elaborated on, it's just sort of thrown in there. So for those who haven't seen the Reignited art book, or for those who don't really know anything about the Reignited art book and its contents, in the pages dedicated to Spyro, there are a line of power-ups, and of course you have your Super Flame, Fairy Kiss, Ice, and then you have two that are named Poison and Bubble. Now in the book, two of these power-ups, Super Flame and Fairy Kiss, do actually have different names, and I imagine it's just to make it easier for people to talk about them by describing what they are instead of what they might be called, and to communicate what the ability is like to the artist that might be working on it or working with it. At least I imagine that's why they're called these. Now, right next to Fairy Kiss on its right is Ice, and then you have Poison and Bubble. Now with Ice there's nothing really to talk about. Poison is a little different, however. From what I've seen, it's usually been referred to as Plasma. However, in the book it's called Poison, which is a rather interesting name for it, since if you know about the elements within the Legend of Spyro, Poison is an element within Dawn of the Dragon, and has only really ever been seen there. So it's interesting to see the name here associated with a green element, or a green power-up. However, of course, in this case, apparently the professor made the poison power-up. So that's the general story behind that. Now with Bubble, it's a bit different. From what I've seen, Bubble has only ever been said to be within Enter the Dragonfly. But actually, while recording for this video, while this video was in a very different state, I actually saw Bubble within Reignited. Now, a few people might have not noticed this. It's a really small detail, and really I didn't even notice it until maybe an hour before recording this. So, while I was on Sunny Beach, I of course got the Super Flame power-up, and I was trying to destroy the chests throughout the level. And when I dove into the water, I noticed something. As I was descending, a bubble surrounded Spyro and then popped, and of course there was the change in Spyro's appearance, going from his Super Flame form to a different form that hasn't really been named, at least until now. Now, this bubble actually lines up with something we see within the art book. Around the depiction of Bubble, bubble surrounds Spyro, and in the next frame of this, it pops, showing that the power-up has activated, much like Super Flame when fire encases Spyro and then disperses. So when I saw this, I, quite frankly, had a bit of a breakdown. Mainly because this meant that Bubble was just slid into Reignited, and I didn't even notice. However, you can tell me if you noticed this before I did in the comment section below. But either way, by the Aether Crest purpleness, Bubble's in Reignited. Though it's just in a version that's an underwater Super Flame. Unlike its counterpart in Enter the Dragonfly, which is only used to retake dragonflies that have been scattered around the Dragon Realms. I'll be talking about more of the story about Bubble and Poison within the power-up video, but for now I'm going to keep it rather brief. So while the original in Enter the Dragonfly was to just capture dragonflies and when encase them in a bubble, in Reignited it seems offensive, like let's say Super Flame, since apparently it's a different form of that. Though this brings up a question of mine that I asked while I was making this video. Does Super Flame and its abilities depend on what environment it's in? Now this isn't to say that Super Flame in and of itself can be changed, but the magic that powers it. Because we don't know that much about magic, I can't say 100% that I'm sure this could be an option. However, since magic powers a great many things in the world of Spyro, it's conceivable that perhaps magic in different states, including ones within power-up gates, can be altered by whatever environment it's in. So we see Bubble become its form underwater, and perhaps, maybe even in space, it could become that void ability we saw in CTR Nitro Field. But that's an entirely different theory and something else for another day if I actually get to that kind of video. Now, Bubble being in Reignited is already crazy enough for me, because that really changes the origin of Bubble, at least in the Reignited timeline. Now my question outside of Super Flame being affected by different environments is, how does it affect Spyro 4? Now I've mentioned plenty of times on this channel that there was a quarterly call a while back where Activision said that they wanted to focus on new titles for their already existing IPs, Crash, Spyro, you name it. Now of course we've already seen this in the form of Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, and we've seen a hint at Spyro 4. Now I'm not going to go into it because a lot of other channels have covered this topic already and have done it a while back. So if you want to go see a good one, I actually have one linked down in the description below by Canadian Guy A. Now perhaps in Spyro 4 they could elaborate on the bubble element itself, maybe even separating it from Super Flame. Or perhaps, while Super Flame could be for the surface, they could delve more into the bubble element of Super Flame and give it its own unique properties when underwater. Perhaps there could be two ways of using it, mixing both the Enter the Dragonfly version of it and also the new and, well, reignited version of it. The Enter the Dragonfly inspired part of this bubble ability could be forming a bubble around an object or even, let's say, an element, like let's say the mentioned before, poison. And these bubbles could be pushed throughout the water and could be either used against enemies that has a certain type of immunity or weakness, or even it could be used for certain minigames where you have to use Bubble to move a certain object through the water, either using water currents or just pushing it through the water yourself and deliver it into a certain place, perhaps for some sort of minigame. Now of course the second and reignited version of it would just be what you see when you use Super Flame under the water, which would mainly just be a ball of bubbles. Now perhaps a water-based power-up like this could bring back one of the cut worlds from Spyro 1, called the Aquifire's Homeworld. Now I'll be talking about that along with a couple other worlds in a later video. Now perhaps Bubble or even other water-based abilities could be an excuse to bring back more water-themed levels, or perhaps a place known as the Aquifire's Homeworld. Now I'll probably cover everything we know about Aquifires in a different video, but to cover it briefly here, the Aquifire's Homeworld is home to, well, the Aquifire family of dragons, who maintain control of the waterways of the Dragon Realms and protect the less fortunate from the monsters that lurk within the deep. Which is rather interesting since, well, we never saw any monsters or even could go in the water in Spyro 1, so it makes me wonder what they had planned for that. Now perhaps this is an excuse to bring the theme of water levels into the Dragon Realms, or perhaps the idea of Aquifires could be brought into a new land, having more water-based levels than land levels. Or at least that's how I imagine it would go. Though I know some people have a bit of an issue with water levels in Reignited, so perhaps they could try and improve the water movement and water combat in the next game, if an Aquifire's Homeworld like land is ever brought into Spyro. But anyway, that's going to be it for me. Again, like I've said throughout the video, if you want to leave your ideas in the comment section, feel free to. Now, if you want to stay updated on video progress when I actually end up getting updates out on Twitter, you can go follow me on there. The link will be down in the description below. Now, if you want to take any of these ideas you have into a live chat and discuss it with other people outside of the comment section, you can go into the Lore of the Dragon Discord. The link to that will be down in the description below, along with the Twitter and Canadian Guy A's video. However, if you just feel like wanting to stick around Lore of the Dragon, feel free to do that as well. But until the next lore video, stay safe, historians.